Okay, live stream. Been a while. Let's see if it's gonna pop up here over on YouTube. Hope everybody. Wow, 22 people already. Cool. Seems like people are ready to practice the dark art of writing with AI later. A lot of signups for that, which is pretty funny since most of the world is like, "Hey, don't do that," but we're gonna do it anyway. Yeah, lots going on. I got the YouTube going, got the Substack going. This is going to be great. Okay, today we're going to have some guests join probably, see if they pop in. We're kind of doing an impromptu talk show here. But first of all, I want to give a bit of a, background on what Protocolized is, why we're doing it. I think many of you already know, but it's a good experiment. So Protocolized is a magazine that we started about a year ago, and this is new to me, but we're making great progress. We've got a great little editorial team. Me, Venkatesh Rao, Tim Bako, James Langdon. Shout out to Josh Davis and Shannon Dixon, who have also been helping with our print publications and our anthologies, which I'm really excited to talk about and share more about. I see Venkat, Andre, Giovanni in the chat. And on YouTube, we have a bunch of people I don't recognize, except one person I do recognize who you will all soon recognize. I'm not going to say who, but you're going to find out. So yeah, we started this magazine about a year ago as part of Summer of Protocols, which is a seasonal research program focused on the study of protocols, with the idea that if we figure out how to use them better, that's going to be great for everybody. Everybody has protocols in their work, and what can we learn from other people's protocols? In particular, we started the magazine because of a program we did in 2024 called our Protocol Pill, Incepting Lore and Literacy. Literacy has been a big theme of ours for a couple years now, and fiction and stories turned out to be a really underrated way to explore some of these ideas. So we were like, the natural thing to do for us as a research institute or a research program is to start a sci-fi magazine, and that's what we've been doing. It's going to be great. So far, we've had really great success. People have been getting tons and tons of fiction in their inbox every day. Not every day, but a couple times a week. And we've ran 3 contests. We've got 3 anthologies, more on the way, some from single authors. Hi, Liz. Welcome to the chat. Liz wrote an awesome story in one of our contests. It just came out. You should read it. It's called Troll. It's one of my favorites. I'll talk about it more later. Yeah, so that's why we started Protocolized, because we wanted to tell stories about protocols, this kind of hard to see thing in the world, and stories do a great job of it, of bringing these things to light. And they're hard to tell stories about. So it's also a challenge to writers. Can you tell a story about this thing that usually goes unseen, that we all do, often subconsciously, that is very important to society, and you often only notice when it breaks? So there's a tendency for these stories to lean towards being a little bit dystopian or a little bit towards horror, which some writers like, some writers don't. So if you're a writer that is kind of leaning towards utopian versions or like happy sci-fi, it's a particularly good challenge. The other thing that we wanted to do with this magazine and starting it wasn't just a new target or a new product, it's a new methodology, a new way of writing stories. And so that is writing with AI. I think that we are one of the few, there are more than one magazine that targets this and uses the AI in the process, but we are radically AI forward. So this means we encourage our writers to use AI. Our contests are AI friendly. We've even taken our stories and made a public notebook LM so you can experiment with the stories, build worlds with them, do some interesting things. And I think that we're still experimenting with this. One thing we like to do is have writers submit their story along with the protocol that they use to write it. So What model did you use? What prompts did you use? What was the loop? Where were you in the process? Was it all AI? We've been really impressed by like some of the stories that have come out of this. This is going to happen anyway. There are going to be stories written by AI. We might as well do it the best of our ability and get ahead of it. And so far, we've had really awesome stories come out of it. We've had anthologies written entirely by AI almost. We've taken workshops that happen in real life with real life considerations and turned them into stories with AI. So experimenting with like the target, which is telling stories about protocols, and then experimenting with the medium, both have been really, you know, not profitable, but really worthwhile in the sense that we're developing new tools, new ideas, new ways to tell stories. Yeah, I'm excited to just talk with people about this today. If you have questions in the chat, for sure, drop them. The next thing I'm going to do is just kind of talk about, um, yeah, why did we start Protocolized? Went over that, and what is Protocolized really? So the way that we've been doing it so far is writing on Substack. That's how most of you have found this. That's how most of people will continue to find it. That's our main distribution. Originally, we were using another platform. We moved to Substack because of the growth. We think that it's a good community. We're excited to be on Substack and work with people here. We are keeping an eye, on more like protocol-based alternatives as they come up, and we continue to work with organizations that are developing those alternatives. In the meantime, though, I think people on Substack are highly aligned with what we're doing, and so it's a great place for us to call home. So if you've been in our Substack, which is protocolized.summerprotocols.com, you'll see that we have been absolutely prolific in the last year. So we have posted, I think, over 80 posts last year, which is a roughly 60-40 mix of fiction and nonfiction. And it's a little strange that we're focusing on fiction in some sense because at our core, the program emerged from a research standpoint. So we're trying to come at this: what are protocols? How do we define them? Can we come up with formal theories for how they work, definitions, some methodologies to experiment with them? And so far, that's been going well. But we're still writing fiction. We're still on Substack. We think it's like a really underrated way to explore this stuff. It's popular. I think that people are really tired of breathless, ventilated prose, this nonfiction. People default to writing nonfiction with AI too. So that whole space is very saturated. And I think that we actually encourage people to generate reports and use AI to develop nonfiction as a way to inform their own practice and study of protocols. But there is something about the information density of nonfiction that people write that is still really good. So we're still trying to crack the like, how do we write great nonfiction with AI? We've had some success, like The Color of Safety, for example, was written with AI. We've got another piece which is like invisible infrastructure and patterns there that was like also successful. But overall, Substack is about, okay, experimenting with both human and AI written fiction as a way to popularize this view of the world, which is like, can you look at it through protocols? Can you use this unit of analysis to like come to a better understanding of how the world works, a more interesting one, a more appreciative one? I think the answer is yes. The tricky part with what we're doing too, the Substack, is when you read these stories, you might notice that it's not always a single person that's the protagonist. And we're trying to put a lot of emphasis on how do you tell stories that aren't about a special person, but about the strange rules that guides everybody's lives. And this was really our big lighthouse concept for last year for fiction, which we're carrying over to this year because it just turned out to be so effective. So we call this Chang's Law. Science fiction is about strange rules. Fantasy is about special people. We're trying not to write fantasy. We're trying to write about worlds where if this thing is true, then what's going on here? And it's going to be this kind of exploration of the logic that unfolds from this premise. And this is often associated with hard fiction, like hard sci-fi, where it's like very technical. We do appreciate that. We also like literary sci-fi. I think both work. The goal here is really to experiment with a new genre, with a new kind of way of writing stories. And this isn't just about experimenting with writing and getting stories from people. Another thing that Protocolized is a study group called our special interest group on protocol fiction. So this has been going on for about a month and a half. Um, and there's just a question in the chat about how do we join this merry crew of weird cyborg writers and also a digital comic creator. I'll talk about that in a second. But the best way to join the group, if you're a writer and interested in this stuff, is our special interest group on protocol fiction, which meets every 2 weeks on our Discord. We have a group of about 10 people. This is hosted by Sachin Benny and Spencer Nitke, co-hosting this group that gets together and they talk about what is protocol fiction, how do we write it, what is it, who's the right audience for this? Are there any tools that we can use to make this better? What are the frameworks? Can we meme this new genre into existence? And kind of thinking about it like a subgenre of sci-fi. Maybe even genre isn't the right frame for this. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's just a particular viewpoint or style. There's a link to Discord in the Substack chat. I highly recommend you join. This is where, if you're joining the rest of the writing workshop, you'll be able to keep up with what's happening. Often people share links here, people share their stories, people pitch new articles and stories. Check it out. Join the study group. So ping Spencer Nitke or Sachin Benny on Discord. Say, hey, I want to join. When's the next meeting? I think it will be next Thursday. I might be getting that wrong, but I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure it's next Thursday, which would be February 26th. So yeah, join Discord, hang out. It's like in the mornings, Pacific time. Yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, we do have one of the co-hosts here for the Protocol Fiction Special Interest Group. Maybe Sachin, you can give us a little bit of a preview about what's going on next, when the next meeting is, and all that.
Oh yeah, the next call is on February 26th. I think you got it right. It's next Thursday, and not sure what the reading specifically would be, but a couple of themes that we have been circling around is the idea of protocol monsters, and we read this paper on the seventh. I think it's called Seven Theses on Monsters, which made sort of like a typology of different types of monsters in society, and we have been trying to connect that to protocols. What does a protocol monster look like? And last week we had a good reading on the idea of narrative rapidity, and this was originally based on an essay by Italo Calvino, where he's talking about the Voltaire novel Candide, and he's talking about how in Candide a lot of things happen within a few pages. There are people getting like the main character is on a journey. There are people getting murdered, but suddenly they come back again alive after suffering a lot of like various things, and a lot of events sort of stack one upon the other to sort of generate this feeling of one, things are moving very fast. Two, it is kind of funny. It's sort of like the gag of misery piling on top of each other, and and we've been trying to think of how the idea of narrative rapidity, which has characteristics of sort of absurdity plus some sort of linear movement. Either it's usually some sort of journey that the characters are on through, and a lot of events happening, and what I think Calvino calls characters being almost rubber-like, in that they can be, a lot of things can happen to them, but they're still alive and still trying to do things in the world. And we've been trying to connect that idea to protocol fiction, and how can protocol fiction have some sort of narrative rapidity, where protocols are complex. They have they evolve through complex, like they have a sort of complex evolution, and to track it completely, it, like, narrative rapidity feels like a good tool, because you can sort of track the entire complexity of the protocol.
Yeah.
But
Sachin, what is your favorite protocol monster that you guys have come up with so far?
let's see. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I think the main theme of the seven theses that stuck out to me was the idea that monsters are some sort of category crisis, as in something that cannot be categorized easily, and so people villainize it, and I think that possibly could map onto protocols. Often, a new protocol can be a category crisis of, like, basically you have not seen anything like this before, so you are kind of like, is this evil, or is this Kafkaesque in some way? I think that's the one that has stuck with me, but I can't think of. We did come up with a few examples, but I can't think of any off the top of my head right
Yeah.
now.
I know that Seth, who's another member of our Discord, has come up with a really like interesting. I mean, I don't want to out him too much, but there's a monster manual which is inspired by Dungeons and Dragons of like these protocol monsters in and around us. Venkat also just pointed out another one uh, in Liz's story. Troll, like there's a protocol monster in that story. But the thing that you mentioned makes me think of like culture shock as kind of a protocol monster in some way. Like you're going into like a new country or a new space or a new organization, and all these protocols are like they just don't fit into your prior, set of ideas and definitions of what things should be like, or these forms of constraint on you.
Yeah, and that feels like a common theme in a lot of protocol stories that I've enjoyed on Protocolized as well, where somebody is coming up against a sort of reality that they didn't know existed. I think Spencer's Zoothesia has that sort of theme of discovering that there's a world that you interact with that is sort of governed by a set of protocols that are unseen, and um, yeah, so I think that is a theme that sort of comes up a lot in stories, of like a character interfacing with uh, a reality that they didn't know existed.
Yeah. So you've been one of the like I think you wrote the third story or the first story ever for Protocolized. You've written a lot of stories last year, and your most recently published one, Desire Machines. Can you talk a little bit about that one? And then I'm going to ask what your favorite story was from last year that you wrote.
Yeah, the story I wrote for the contest, the bridge contest, was Desire Machines, and the I think the interesting constraint of the bridge contest was that there were a lot of requirements for the types of bridges that were needed. You wanted a story where the bridge is under some sort of tension, either it's collapsing or either it's emerging, and you wanted some kind of human actor that's like a a mediator type. And I think the amount of constraints that were there made the story more interesting. Um, and so the main theme that I sort of went with was this idea of basically an island that hypothetically, speculatively, it could be in the Caribbean, and it's not, and it's not real. It's speculatively set in the Caribbean, and it's set during the time when the sport of cricket has taken off in England. And one interesting thing that stood out to me about the history of cricket is that a lot of cricket rules were created by people who wanted to bet on cricket. So if you're not familiar, cricket is like this very divisible sport where there are like overs, innings, and each over has like 6 balls. So it's very divisible into like very small units. So it's very ideal for betting. And it has this history of its rules being sort of manipulated by bettors from its a very early stage. So I took that, and there was a big history of cricket in the Caribbean, but also a lot of Indians, like a lot of slave trade from India to the Caribbean, and I sort of mixed those themes and added the speculative element of what if Charles Babbage's difference engine actually worked, and this particular island had enough money to set up a betting economy around cricket matches. So in some ways, kind of like a Las Vegas, but for sports, situated on an island. That's sort of the thing that I went with.
Everybody should read this story because it's like the history behind it is so cool, and this dynamic where it's like it's not the players shaping the game, but like all the people betting on it. It reminds me a lot about Polymarket today and how people, go on stage and all of a sudden it's the betting market driving what's happening in the speech rather than the speech driving what's happening in the markets. It's very different. Speaking of stuff that you wrote last year, I think one of the most interesting projects, I have another one in mind, but one of the most interesting ones was the librarians. So for context, the librarians, we ran a workshop in California at Edge City called Knowledge Futurama. And basically went through a red team, blue team scenario, attacking, defending across a timeline of 1,000 years. People had to defend a knowledge artifact. All these cases, we had 6 teams, were transcribed, and Sachin turned them into stories. We actually have this anthology in print, and if you show up to all of the workshops this weekend, you could get one of these. So could you tell me about what it was like taking the workshop contents and turning it into a 6-chapter anthology? It's all narrative, but this was a very nerdy technical workshop. What was that process like, and should people do it?
Yeah, I think one of the other SOP alums, Amber, wrote a paper about sort of the mechanism of the workshop itself, and I think that is worth probably linking and worth reading as well. And I think the interesting thing was I was surprised how naturally the stories came together, because it was basically sort of put together by like each workshop artifact was put together by I think 6 teams, and so there was a lot of information in there, and it was surprisingly conducive to narrative. And I think one sort of trick that I got familiar with and used was the idea of like a story-worthy moment, and this comes from the book Storyworthy by Matthew Dix. And Matthew Dix is this guy who has like participated in a lot of popular short story competitions like the Moth and things like that. And his main the main idea that has stuck with me is that for a good story, some sort of change has to happen, and there is usually like a 5 second moment in which that change happens, usually like towards the third act or something. And for example, I think he uses Jurassic Park as an example, where in the beginning, one of the characters does not like children. He's kind of on the fence about having children with Laura Dern's character, and then in the middle of the movie, there is a moment where he gets stuck on a tree with two kids, and he sort of has this moment of bonding with them. And Matthew Dick says that's sort of like the 5 second moment of, you can see he went from I don't want to have children to, oh, I like children, this might be a good idea. And so I think I basically took those workshop material and tried to find those like story worthy moments in like the different artifacts, and they were all surprisingly conducive to like everything had like some moment of big change that could be done. So that's sort of how I went about it, and definitely highly recommend doing that workshop itself. Um, I think especially we did this like 6 months ago, and it's interesting to think that LLMs have become much more capable in just those 6 months, like even in terms of writing and stuff like that. So if you just do the artifacts, if you just do the workshop, and if you just have those written artifacts, you could upload them into an LLM, and I think like pretty easily make good stories out of them, because I think the workshop structure is very conducive to producing those like story worthy like narrative moments. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was a really great workshop. The template is available on the Summer Protocols website, summerprotocols.com. If you go to the field guide and then go to the workshop section, yeah, it's there. I think people should do it. I think people should also experiment writing with LLMs and doing protocol fiction. So we've got a session this afternoon about writing with AI. Are you going to be there, Sachin?
Yeah, I think I'll try to be there. Yeah.
Okay, that'd be sweet. And yeah, that'd be great. The last thing I want to ask about was a story called Zero Knowledge, which is actually just a series of like little vignettes and little situations where people were exhibiting this technology. Could you talk about the difference between writing narrative short stories versus something that's a slightly different format, like Zero Knowledge?
Yeah. That one I enjoyed doing a lot because it's sort of a I like reading those type of like short speculative stories, or like really short like one page stories, like. And usually I think those type of stories don't really make an impact unless there's like a few of them. And one of the writers I really enjoy is Lydia Davis, who basically just writes these 1-2 page short fiction, and but she makes like 400 page books out of those, and so altogether they are sort of very impactful, I feel. And I think the process in that case was again sort of like you needed some sort of change being like shown to the user, as in something happening, and across like 6 or 7 stories, you sort of got an idea of, even if you didn't know what zero knowledge proof is, you sort of got an impression of the different types of things that zero knowledge proof could do, but without being too theoretical and trying to be a bit more sort of funny and absurd about it. So yeah, but I guess before I go, I'd like to ask you, like, what are I guess yeah, you've edited so many stories, and like seen so much protocol fiction. So what's been sort of your general impression from like reading so much, and um, yeah, like what do you look for now when you, because you like when you now see a new story, I feel like you'll be able to judge faster than most of us. So like what do you look for when you see a new protocol fiction story?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's getting up to like having read, probably close to 300 or 400 of these stories. And I would say that the requirements, like the basic requirements, are kind of the same for like any story that you'd read. So I love having like a good hook that gets me into it because these are short stories. So like you were saying, like rapidity is a really important factor. How quickly can you just get some context and get into the story? Um, I think that telling the story of a world through like something that's not worldly is very interesting. So like how you talk about like this the effect of zero knowledge proofs and zero knowledge systems, like somebody going to check out at a grocery store. Like it's just the whole world, you can kind of like imagine the consequences just from that anecdote. That's a really good thing for me. And again, like we've just been increasing like the quality of our authorship here in the writing. So looking for that. The single most important thing for me is like, is this something that I want to like when I come back to it and read it again? I'm going to be excited to read it again. And a lot of the stories we publish, like, I am like every single one. I'm like, okay, this is great. This comes across my desk. If I find a link to it, like I often go back and read them again, which is a really fun part of this job. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, somebody on a different call yesterday, completely unrelated to Summer protocols. So I mentioned that I write some for Protocolized, and they mentioned that they're always looking forward to the next Protocolized story, and I was very happy to hear that. So
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we couldn't do it without you, Sachin. So, and if anybody wants, like, yeah, join the study group. You can hang out with Sachin more. There's a writing workshop tomorrow on fiction, and then the writing with AI workshop this weekend. Go read the librarians. Go read Sachin's stuff on Substack, and he has his own Substack, Summer Lightning, which you should also subscribe to. So yeah, thanks, Sachin. I'm gonna bring Raph on now.
thanks.
See ya. Okay, we have a. Oh, there he is. Okay, hey Rafa.
Wrong one. Wrong one. I'm on my phone today, but
That's okay.
here, ready to hang out.
This is great. Nice beard, man. It's solid. So Rafa leads the special interest group on protocols for business. He's also the author researcher who wrote "Welcome to the Swarm" in 2023. Works a lot with protocols. Works um, with DAOs and governance. Does many things. And I'm curious, Rafa, what you're working on with the special interest group for business and how you're thinking about writing nonfiction about protocols today, because I've heard on Substack that you have your own little writing experiment going.
I do, I do. So I think the thing that's most interesting to me so far is kind of thinking about management and businesses not from the perspective of human relationships, which is, of course is critically important, but more so from the systems that kind of constrain the decisions and the trade-offs that we can make and what equilibriums we reach by default. In a recent post of which I think we call finding fault lines in the firm with Protocolized, we talked about this thing which is when you find recurring problems in business environments, often they point to states of equilibrium. They're problems that exist persistently because they actually are this like the outcome of a stable situation of an equilibrium. And I think Timber, you spoke you this was heavily influenced by your work in Safe New World, and the discussion around tensions. I think you have a post called "One Tension to Rule Them All," which was really good. And um, and so yeah, it's been a really exciting approach to rethink how to manage a business from the perspective of influencing protocols. One additional reference that I would put out there is that um, there's a book called "Turn That Ship Around," which I think Venkat recommended, and and it talks quite a bit about like policy, like how you can influence decisions and business outcomes through shaping policy and the protocols that guide the day-to-day activities within different environments. Um, yeah, so that's a little bit of the protocols for business interest group. If you're interested, our next meeting is, I believe, on Monday, and we're actually going to be looking at what does protocol consulting look like and a potential approach for thinking through how to identify a recurring problem, sourcing what are the influences or the protocol kind of tangle or mesh or the individual protocol that that leads to that equilibrium. And we're going to be talking specifically about the problem about sharing water data in California. So more in the public sector. Very pretty exciting stuff for me and exciting for some other folks. So if you're interested, definitely join on Monday. And I don't know, Timber, I've spoken a lot, so I'm not sure if you want to add anything.
Yeah.
And then I can also talk about the NPC project.
Yeah. I saw like a bunch of people on Substack who like I recognize, and in notes we like often talk about nerdy business stuff. I've started calling them the LinkedIn diaspora. Like they've
Yeah.
come over here, they're worn out. But yeah, I would love to talk more about NPC Inc. and your new identity as a like slop cannon. I think this is
Slop Cannon. I think it's been interesting. I've always enjoyed writing, and actually, back in 2020 was the first time that I actually did more of the creative writing. I started doing morning pages, and that was really a huge unlock in terms of thinking process. And then last year, LLMs came around, and well, not last year, in the last couple of years, LLMs have come around, and they were quite useful for some more like procedural stuff. um, but I wanted to experiment a little bit more if things could get a little bit funky and weird. And so in December, so the first thing that I did was I tried to write a short story, which is called Latency. It's also published on Protocolized using, really early days. I've learned a lot about text manipulation since then and generations. And that story was informed by my own writing, using it as a template for kind of like voice and style and some other writing that I had done, but I hadn't actually like refined it or anything. So really raw ideas, and then converted them into a short story with regards to a protocol world that's quite frictionless. So um, you can imagine a situation where kind of like Amazon knows what you want and ships it to your door before you need to, before you even think about it. You use the last bag of tea, but the tea just shows up like immediately a minute later with like your next bag of tea or whatever. But and some more spooky or gloomy thoughts around how that influences relationship dynamics. Now, after I wrote that short story, I also started thinking about using LLMs for personal education and doing what I call currently like reading horizontally. So I first find a bunch of high quality sources. Then I try to synthesize them together by looking at a specific theme, and from that emerge a thesis and a logic argument, and then create different like essays and reports. You can see it's on Substack. NPC Memo, I believe it's called. and it's been really fun. I kind of started the Substack, and I'm publishing for myself, so I really apologize to the readership. I'm really not taking your perspective into consideration, and I'm mostly trying to understand, how do I write essays that help me understand new topics, and how do I convert information into a style that I enjoy. Uh, Most recently, I was unpacking a book that I half read last year, also through the through Venkat's Contraptions Reading Club, called um, the History of Print by Eisenstein. Um, I can't remember the exact name of the book, but I read broken pieces about like maybe like 30 or 40% of the book, and I was thinking about that and thinking about the concept of technology stabilization. And I also wanted to critique, in blockchain, these two investment theses which have come up. One, which is the fat protocol thesis, where value accrues to the protocol via tokens, and the other, which was the fat app thesis, where an application can have tokens where the value like is captured by the applications on a protocol or on a platform. And I wanted to compare that to to the process that the print press went through in terms of adoption. If you're familiar with Carlota Perez, both the installation and deployment periods, and I wanted to draw analogies between them, and then also use both of those, blockchain and the print press, and other technological twists that we've had with, thinking about AI and LLMs. So that's the latest 10,000 word essay, on the Substack. But really, I've internalized the slop can, and I was just like, there's a report that I want. I'll try to make it high quality, something that I do enjoy, and then I'm posting it for people to check. The blog is a bit surrealist. Like, I'm not spending a lot of time making sure people know what's real and what's not. So just bear in mind, take it with a grain of salt.
I think the blog is like it's just so fascinating to look at. And like if they didn't know you, they'd be like, is this person just feeding themselves these things? It kind of makes me think it's like Anki cards on steroids.
Yeah, yeah. I There was a period of time, I think in December or January, where I was posting one report or post like every day or so. Really, I was inspired by Chor Farn, who's doing the series, the AI powered series on geopolitics and technology patterns, and he just posts one a day. Just full on. And I was like, you know what? When this type of information consumption becomes frictionless, like, what does it look like for me? Like, what would I post about every day? What would I read every day? And so I think it's an experiment in understanding, yeah, how deep can you go down a rabbit hole, and letting other people join along for the journey.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Rafa. We're gonna bring on Spencer. You're not gonna be at the AI writing with AI workshop, but I will give people like a preview of how you do it because it is like very sophisticated.
Yeah. No, I'll be there tomorrow, right? Oh,
The
not
writing with
tonight.
AI one.
Tonight.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, tonight. Yeah. Yeah, it's gotten pretty sophisticated. I think I shared with you like an example of like how to develop thesis statements and critiques. Um, but definitely, yeah, it's gotten quite sophisticated. My one tip would be that if you are doing nonfiction with LLMs, you make sure you get high quality sources first, in PDF form. So actually, buy the book or get the book. I won't judge you. And then the second is, off of those high quality sources, make sure you understand what the anchor exploration statement, whether it's a thesis or a question, is, and articulate it really well. And through that, then you can start transforming that question into a type of outline and exploration. But those two have been like quite critical changes. I would also highly recommend getting a book on essay architecture, so you can communicate really well with the LLM in terms of the types of essays that you're interested in building, whether it's a steelman or a strawman or a spiral argument or any other type of a process.
Right. Good advice for everybody. Okay, Rafa, see you tomorrow.
See ya.
And our last guest before I share some tips and sneak peeks of what's coming down the pipe this year. Spencer Nitke is the other co-host of our Protocol Fiction Special Interest Group, two-time Protocolized Contest winner, and author of the recently published series Zuthesia, which I think is the first thing you should talk about, is this really trippy 6 installment series set in the world of Zuthesia. And what is special about this world, Spencer?
What what is special about the world? I mean, that's probably a question readers are a little bit better equipped to answer than me. Um, the sort of genesis of that series was thinking about this wasn't a term I had at the time I started writing it, but the concept of an algorithmic state or a kind of shift from traditional like state sovereignty models of governance into something ruled a little bit more and it ruled a little bit more by prediction and hard-coded principles, which felt like something that naturally fitted with the kind of protocol fiction ethos and toolkit that we've developed with our like through our work on the genre. It's the big sort of the big sort of overarching principle of the story is a world where AR integration has pretty much become ubiquitous, at least in the part of the world where the story is taking place. And the protocols that govern that, how people are allowed to change or not change their perception of other people and living creatures in that world. It was pretty inspired by social media algorithms and how we think about either preventing, reducing, or protecting people from harm. The kind of big overarching rule that centers all 6 of the stories is this concept of perception must preserve. So the kind of guiding principle of this overarching algorithm that impacts how people perceive other people is I sort of like lay out a long history of it, how it started with like this idea that we should make sure people aren't being erased from other people's perception. How do we prevent things like social death in a world where people can suddenly augment their own perceptive experiences? And then ultimately, when we base a system entirely on preventing or minimizing harm, how does that sort of end up snaking back around into well, maybe visualizing everyone all the time is actually counterproductive to harm. Obviously, a world where you can only see yourself, you probably wouldn't hurt anyone else, but there's also sort of pervasive harm of a universe full of solipsists. And so how in this like complicated world where there's other big, things like the market, there's states, and then there's like individual, like day-to-day relationships, interpersonal dramas. How does this all interact with a big, mindless, sometimes invisible, sometimes hyper-visible system that controls who and what you see and when?
One of the greatest things about this series, like other than the quality of the writing and the plot, which are both super, super good, is that it really shows, without being a space opera, the effect of like different groups that have different interests. Like they all get exposed to the same rule. They all have something that they want to do, and then they interact with each other. And it's just one of the best like parts of the story. Like you start to really like some of the different like groups and get other feelings about others. But like a lot of the time people read, especially in fantasy, it's like my vision of the world coming into reality versus I have a vision of the world, and so these like 100 other people, and they're all slightly different, and this is the consequence. How do you manage that in your head and like help play it out in the series?
Yeah, I've been thinking because it's something we're maybe going to talk a little bit about in the fiction group tomorrow is how the challenges of writing a sort of extended world, which is kind of like what you're touching on there, of how do you do this. And the metaphor that's been coming to mind is if you play a lot of like strategy video games, there's this thing called fog of war, which is you'll sometimes get like a big overlay of the map, but you won't see the specifics of what's happening in a area of that map unless you have a house there, a specific like unit that you control there reveals the details of the area. It's one of my favorite modifications on chess. Fog of War chess is like a very fun sort of chess thing where you only see the pieces on the chessboard that your pieces have access to. So if you like open up one of your bishops and suddenly a whole diagonal appears in your vision, it's a totally different strategy. And in some ways, writing this big world felt a little bit like that, and that I made a lot of outlines. I think Timber and Venkat and James, one of the other editors, saw at one point very early that big map, and they probably, if they go back now, would notice a lot of differences in how the world actually played out. I think that's because a lot of the like intricacies and details really only came about through like incursion, or actually like entering a space with a character, and having those sort of stories backfill the future stories was really important, and feeling like I had specifics that arose through like particular story needs ended up being way more useful than like big picture stuff planned beforehand. So like kind of like the answer of how I kept all that straight was like I just kept writing stories and then reading them back when I was reading the next story, and pushing each story into a slightly new place. So, you know, the first story I'd say kind of just explores the base, introduces the rule with like a character. The second one dove into like an interpersonal relationship. And then eventually by like the fourth or fifth story, I was exploring like how does one prediction like engine, the like market, the economy interact with this other prediction market. And in terms of how I kept that all straight, I had good editors that would remind me of things from earlier stories that I needed to get straight. And yeah, just feeling like always sort of going story or like story concern first into each of the problems revealed a lot of details that helped sort of stitch things together, I guess.
Yeah, I think that like, I mean, you're a much more talented writer than I am. The thing that I'm taking away from this is that when you write stories, it's a lot easier to kind of backfill or like retcon the world building, like than trying to like build a world and like fill it with good stories. Like you can do both, but it seems like you can do one of them incrementally and you can't really do world building as incrementally.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, I don't
But
know.
maybe you
It's
can't.
yeah.
Are you going to do world building? So you're running the workshop on, or helping run the workshop along with James, who's an editor of the magazine, and Sachin tomorrow. This workshop on fiction. Are you going to do world building tomorrow?
I think we're gonna touch on it a little. I'll talk about it as part of my like sort of like intro talk, and then we'll see where the interest of the group lies and what sort of stuff people are most interested in. Yeah, I think for me, and again, like if you ask 20 writers what their like process is or what works for them, you'll get 25 different answers. For me, the world building that I get most excited about always kind of like showed up a little bit as a surprise, either through like putting characters in like novel situations, giving them sort of like weird bespoke desires, and then letting the logic of that play out. So I think that for me, world building, it works more as sort of an emergent property of the writing than a top-down edict. Like I need enough, for this series at least, I needed enough like structure that I could like write within constraints and not be like totally starting from scratch each time. But it felt like the elements that I most enjoyed about the world were things that would sometimes surprise me with each story. and that arose like, so again, sometimes that was through like character, sometimes it was through like a plot ending in a way I didn't quite expect going into it. Sometimes it's just sort of like the prose carrying you in interesting directions that were surprising for me. So yeah, that was kind of all the tethers that pulled the world out. Yeah.
One quick digression, because I can't help myself. You said like Fog of War chess is a great variation. I agree. I think it's one of the best. I also really like duck chess. Have you played duck chess?
No, what's duck chess?
Okay. So Rafa, who was just on, and I got really into duck chess like a few years ago. And so the way that duck chess works is there is a rubber duck on the board, and every turn you get 2 moves. First you move the duck, and then you move a piece. So basically,
the duck like prevents other pieces from going to that square. Oh,
it can't be captured. And to win, you have to capture the opponent's king. So it's slightly different. But I think that these like, you know, people like to bash chess because everybody in business uses it as like an image on their LinkedIn article. But like it actually can be a good frame for analyzing things. The other thing I wanted to plug was, so Spencer was a judge in our most recent contest because in these 2 contests he won, and he did a really good job. These stories, we've got the first contest we ever ran called Terminological Twists, which is our first anthology. Noise Ordinance, which is great story. This is like canonical protocol fiction. And then Soda is Sweet as Blood, which is an awesome, heartwarming story. The more stuff I see about AI going around, the more I'm like, that was a prescient story. Yeah. What was your biggest takeaway from the Bridges contest that we ran?
Oh, my biggest takeaway. Yeah, I'm gonna steal something I heard Venkat say about the competitions at one point, where he sort of framed it as some of the goals of those first 2 competitions were sort of teaching writers what protocol fiction is through asking them to do this competition. And a thing I thought that he had sort of foreseen and that I saw play out reading the stories was this competition was maybe sort of a shift where writers are now starting to teach us what protocol fiction can be in novel ways. So there was like a lot of different types of stories, a lot of different POVs, a lot of different scales. And I think there was the things that worked about a story were never super reducible to like a type or like trope or like pre-configured like story structure or like type of character. So it was a lot of, I guess just the breadth of possibility that protocol fiction still has to explore was a big thing that the stories taught me.
Okay, I muted myself. I agree. Yeah, I think the more that time goes on, the more that we are being challenged as editors. I'm really glad that we have James here to like help with that now. And yeah, one of the things that is now becoming essential is that everybody that contributes to Protocolized like helps act as each other's editors, because the level of understanding of what protocol fiction is like really growing quickly, and I think that the writers have a strong grasp of it now. So make sure that when you're working on your protocol fiction stuff, like go in the Discord, share an early draft, get some feedback from your peers. They know a lot about it. Spencer and Sachin have written tons for Protocolized. There are other people like Amita and our contest contestants on the shortlist and the winners from the past 3 contests. So yeah, thanks Spencer for coming on, and looking forward to the session tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so we're almost at the hour. I'm going to take more than 1 minute because, okay, I'm the only person here and there's no production team. It's just me for now. There are some people behind the scenes, of course, doing important work here. The little elves. And the last things I wanted to talk about was the logistics, the practical stuff, like how do we run Protocolized? So The best ways to like get into it are the Discord. There are a couple links in the chat. Join the chat. You can join Rafa's study group. You can join Spencer and Sachin's study group. Kia Krittler runs a special interest group on memory, which is fantastic. And last but not least, Venkat and Patrick Nast run a special interest group on formal protocol theory. So if you're the math type, the formal logic type, even if you don't have a really like deep background in it, but have good intuitions, I would highly recommend joining that group. So these study groups on Discord as well, we do our pitches. So if you want to pitch a story, go in the forum section, pitch it, explain it. Ideally, come with the first draft. It makes the process a lot easier for us. You're going to have to get a first draft together anyway. Might as well go ahead and do it. Or you can join the study group and get like a little bit of feedback on your concept first. Read some of the protocolized stuff on Substack. The Substack and the Discord are the main places to go. If you want to access old protocol research to like inspire your story or inform your article, go to summerofprotocols.com. That's still our archive for our main like part of the research program, which covers stuff from occupational health and safety to networking protocols to link rot, case studies, the protocol pill and septum lower literacy projects. Yeah, join those. Subscribe to us on Substack, obviously. Comment, find people, find stuff that you're interested in, give feedback on the articles and the stories you like. I think writers really appreciate that. And this is all, there's a community growing here. There's a community of writers. They're on Discord. We're trying to bring that writer's room idea. So like lots of yes and work with each other. And yeah, logistics aside, what are we up to this year? Well, more publishing. We're running this writer's workshop. We're going to do more anthologies. We're going to experiment more with AI. We encourage the slop canons to join us. And it's not just producing slop into the ether like you can anywhere else. We have some really great people that work with us to make these beautiful anthologies. They stack up really nicely. I think the next one will be a different color, I assume. And yeah, your slop could become printed. We've taken a lot of inspiration from old pulp magazines like Astounding. Astounding pulp magazines were like a cultural phenomenon, and there's no reason for AI generated sci-fi to not be the same thing. This stuff was cheap. It was produced like almost like recipes, and it made these huge cultural impacts. Like Asimov came out of it. He wrote Foundation, which is like a wonderful series, both like as books and as a show. So much talent came out of those like cheap, gritty pulp magazines. And we have now the same opportunity to do so digitally. I think it was already an opportunity, but with AI, it's like once we crack the formula here and we start putting out like great science fiction every day and we really get people into a groove here, we can do some interesting world building with Spencer and Sachin and that study group. And then the whole time, we're also going to be driving on protocol research. We've got some interesting announcements coming next month about fundamental research and projects. We're going to keep going with what we're doing, previous research on memory, on business, on formal theory through our study groups. We're very intent on those people generating white papers, academic papers, getting into this kind of like formal building of theories and working together to build a more strong understanding of what protocols are, how it can affect them, how this unit of analysis can be improved for everybody in all different fields, from high tech like crypto stuff to climate to healthcare to occupational health and safety to governance. There are lots and lots of applications. So yeah, more publishing, more sci-fi. Join us on the Discord, join us on Substack. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah, we're really looking forward to this workshop this weekend. And depending on how this goes, we might do more of them. We might do more of them this summer. We're going to run another protocol school. You can already access the last one, the videos. They're all on YouTube, kind of in a self-serve way. The course slides are there. The course materials are there alongside the videos. So you can take yourself through it. We'll have another version this fall. It's going to be a little bit different, but even better. And yeah, keep around the community. Show up to the Writing with AI workshop this afternoon. Show up to the fiction session tomorrow and the nonfiction tomorrow. And after all of that, we're going to start working together on the rest of the roadmap for the year together. Because like I said, this is not something that can happen without the writers. The writers are a part of this. It is the slop artillery coming together to make an agenda for Protocolized. And we're really happy to keep going with this project, to keep publishing the new pulp. And yeah, if you stick around for the rest of the workshop, we do have a bunch of these left over from when we printed them in Argentina earlier this year. I believe one of us on the team has a bunch of these copies. So if you're around for today, the AI writing, the fiction, the nonfiction, if you run the whole gauntlet, send me a DM on Discord and I will figure out how to get you one of these. They're pretty limited edition. You can't buy them anywhere. So this will be your chance to get in the door early. And looking forward to seeing everybody at the rest of the workshop. Thanks so much for tuning in, and hope you have a good weekend. Whether or not you are learning to write with AI, learning to write about protocol fiction or nonfiction, thanks for tuning in. And if you're watching this later, if you watch this like 2 years in advance, this is what it looked like before Protocolized had 100,000 subscribers and was the most popular science fiction magazine in the world. So this is like a little time travel bubble. Okay, bye everybody.